I was on a mission to ride my second most favorite ride in all of Disney World, Dinosaur, for the very last time. Sadly, they will be closing this ride and replacing it with something new. But this trip wasn't all bittersweet, but I did come across something so inspiring that it sparked an idea that I'd be crazy not to try. Why not recreate a miniature version of the Hallelujah Mountains of Pandora? If the Imagineers over at Disney World could create such an impressive life-size replica of these mountains, why couldn't I recreate a smaller version? And better yet, why not turn it into a functional base for a flower arrangement? How hard could it be, right? Step 1 was pretty easy, just drawing up the plans. It wasn't until step 2 where I really needed to ask for help. I don't have any experience cutting metal or welding, so that part really needed to be outsourced. Luckily, I have an amazing group of guys that I work with that were able to get that job done for me. Thank you so much for all of your help. I could have never done this without you. After the metal base was completed, I used a small hacksaw blade to carve out my mountains out of styrofoam. When the mountains were carved, I attached them directly to the metal base using a solvent-free silicone caulk material. It was very important to use solvent-free because a lot of other chemicals will eat away at your styrofoam and completely ruin all of your hard work. I then used that same material to cover the entire surface of the mountains. This particular caulk was great because it was also a paintable type caulk, which not all of them are, so that was important for this particular project. Now that I've put a couple layers of sealant on the entire surface of my mountains, it's time for paint. As you can see from my paint drawer, I had a few options to choose from, but I decided to go with an acrylic paint for a couple of reasons. First of all, acrylic paints are very pigmented, but they can be diluted down with water. This makes it easier to control the intensity of the color. Side note, I did a quick practice run on the bottom layer and I think I was right in choosing acrylic. Second of all, acrylic paints dry extremely fast, which is very beneficial when working on a project that requires multiple layers. And lastly, with acrylic paints, it's common practice to work from darker colors to lighter colors, which gives you this really great effect of the darker colors shining through the lighter ones, giving you a really nice finished product. I decided to go with burnt umber as the base color for my mountains. As you see, it is one of the darker acrylic colors, but I was able to dilute it down with a good amount of water to make it that perfect consistency for that first layer of paint. Just make sure you do lay down some protective material for whatever surface you're working on because it does drip. The main goal of this first layer is to make sure that the entire surface area of your project is covered. A potential issue you could come across during this process is if you missed a couple of spots when initially covering the styrofoam with the sealant. What will happen is your paint will absorb directly into the styrofoam. That was the purpose of sealing it. So all you have to do is continue to paint layers until you have a consistent base. Moving on to the next layer, I mixed equal parts yellow oxide with burnt umber and added a dab of warm white to lighten the color. The amount of paint does not have to be precise. I just eyeballed it. What is important is that you get that final color you're looking for. I swear I am the clumsiest person I know. So if you're thinking about building something like this, I promise, no coordination needed, except maybe for the metalwork. All right, now you can continue to layer. But remember, each layer should be lighter than the layer before. And you can accomplish that by adding a little bit of warm white to the color you had already pre-mixed. Towards the end of layering, I did add a little bit of red earth to that paint mixture so that I could give a natural color variation to the rock. And for the final layers, I stuck with a mixture of mainly warm white with a little bit of yellow oxide. Be very careful with this. I did have to add a lot of water to really dilute it. You don't want just bright white in your face, but you do want some of those lighter spots to show to kind of simulate the sun shining on your rocks. Moving right along, I have to say this was probably the most challenging material to come by of this entire project. The majority of vines made specifically for crafts were really expensive, and I had a budget I was trying to work with. Luckily, I came across these jungle vines that are primarily made for reptile enclosures. They ended up being exactly what I needed. They were inexpensive, they were extremely realistic, and the inside has a metal wire that was perfect for getting the vines and roots into the shapes that I needed. This part is a little more difficult to explain the process. I pretty much just cut the vines into the length that I needed and tried to shape them and place them on the metal as if they were naturally growing out of the rock. I then would intertwine different sizes of the vines so that it would hold in place. I actually did not use any adhesives for this part. I didn't think it was needed. I was able to stick the wire into the styrofoam and hold it in place, or then wrap other sections together, and the end product was a really sturdy root system. Next, I added the final piece of the mountain. I then went back in with the caulk to cover the seams to give it a flush appearance. I just grabbed whatever was handy to smooth the caulk, and in this situation, it happened to be a torn off piece of cardboard from a package of batteries. Reuse, reduce, recycle, right? I then used the same painting process as before, using the acrylic paints to paint from the darkest layer to the lightest layer. After finishing up with the paint, I went directly into attaching the moss using the same caulk. This stuff has really been the MVP for this project. I will definitely be using it on my next one. There was something really relaxing about attaching the moss to the rocks. I would just sit there and stare at the rock until I found the perfect place to attach it. And I think that process worked great for me. If you are interested in knowing any of the materials I used for this project, I will definitely list everything in the description below. Next up, I used a small hacksaw blade to carve out the basin for the flower arrangement. I don't think this was the best choice. There has to be a way I could have done this faster. It was so inefficient and really messy, but it got the job done. And with a little vacuuming and a final seal inside the basin, I was finally ready to move on. The flowers I found at the wholesale warehouse totally made the trip worth it. I will definitely be returning for more, but hopefully not during a rainy day. Once I finally got all of the flowers home, it was time for processing. The first flowers that caught my eye were these pincushion proteas. They definitely look alien. I think these are Stars of Bethlehem flowers. I wasn't sure. I randomly found them at Whole Foods and they weren't labeled. But I really did like them, so if you know the name of these flowers, please comment below. These flowers are called Scabiosa. The next ones are swamp lilies, then amaranth. Now this was the real star of my arrangement. They are called Brunia and make a great filler. Next up, another species of protea. And lastly, I got these delphinium from my local florist, just for these little cute little curly stems. They look very alien. Now that the flowers are all processed, it's time to start the arrangement. I decided to go with chicken wire to support my flowers. It's a really popular alternative to the more toxic, less environmentally friendly floral foam. Quick PSA, floral foam is trash. Once my chicken wire was in place, I filled the basin with water. Unfortunately, it was immediately obvious that I missed a spot when sealing the inside, but that's an easy fix. I just need to add more caulk. Now it's finally time to add the flowers. I like to take my time with this process, adding each stem piece by piece until I have that perfect finished arrangement. Thank you so much for following along as I took my big idea that I'd be crazy not to try and brought it to life. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more. Who knows what I'll create next? Oh, and please enjoy my totally epic short film.